we talk about the temperature and the amount of frozen water, but GelatoPassport Plus offers also another possibility to look at the freezing curve itself. If we go down until the freezing curve data, we have a table with the data. I will not go into details on how this is calculated. There are different ways of calculating this data. What is important is that when you compare different recipes, you use the same method and you don't compare different methods and different recipes. Otherwise, you will have very different data. So what we can do is just to plot our freezing curve. But if this is not enough to give us some really interesting insight, what we want to know is how one freezing curve compares to another one, meaning how a recipe compares to another recipe. And if we move here, we have a graph where already there's a freezing curve. This is a theoretical freezing curve of a solution of 20% sucrose. So if we click on Add Freezing Curve, what happens is that we get a new freezing curve with the values of our recipe. You can see here you have a legend. You can also click, select, and unselect the freezing curve if you want to see one or another. But what is the powerful thing is that now in the same app, I want to change something in my recipe. So I go to the top, and let's say that instead of putting 140 of sucrose and 25 of dextrose, I want to put 110 of sucrose and 55 of dextrose. I want to know how my recipe will be. So at this point, I can also give to my recipe a different name. So let's call it cream modified. I go here and I can click Add Freezing Curve again. What happens is that I get a new freezing curve for my new recipe, and I can compare it with the previous recipe. So for example, let's remove the 20 sucrose because we are not interested in that. And let's see what happens. My recipe, as you see from the freezing curve, will be softer than the previous one because the freezing curve is below. So at the same temperature, it has less frozen water. And this way is very useful when we want to make recipes that they have a similar behavior in the showcase. Of course, this doesn't take in account the overrun, but it's already a first step when you want, for example, to replace sugars. If we want to make a recipe with polyalcohols instead of regular sugars, this is the first step that you have to follow.